Hello everyone. I'd like to share what I learned from readings. It's not research, but just read something and learn something. And just share what I've learned. Uh, I'm interested in institutions in sociology. So I will share about what is institutions and why I'm interested and some contents in books. So what is institutions in sociology? Like market is as an institution, democracy as an institution, or marriage and family also can be regarded as an institution. So the concept of institution is that rules and norms about social behavior in a given area, and the corresponding social structures and social concept that makes those rules work. So rules are not just rules itself, but also ensure that they work for allows for now to work their place and course, social structure, organization, resource allocation, information distribution, etc. For example, in a society who can own guns and some information about law is available to courts. What is social perceptions? It's about beliefs and legitimacy of behavior, casuality, etc. It's the idea of normative rules, the idea of how the world works. For example, laws have to have some legitimacy. If these laws go against basic principles and people don't accept them, they can't work. So how institutions can regulate people's behavior? So there's a distinction between hard, I call it hard institutions or soft institutions. There are different aspects of institutions. Hard institutions is like extrinsic incentives which can have material consequences, like coercive means such as laws or economic incentives. For soft institutions, it means internal change by changing perceptions, shaping people's beliefs, like perception of what the world is like, perceptions of how behavior should be. So it's the product of culture and socialization. So actually, all institutions often contains both of these concepts. So there are some different analytical approaches in so-called neo-institutionalism in political science and sociology intellectual trend. It's helpful to know about this to place what I read or what these authors say into academic research lineage. So the first one is historical new institutionalism. These scholars see institutions as the result of conflict, competition, interaction between actors with different interests and powers. They consider both hard institutions, like social structures, and soft institutions, like cultural perceptions. They explain institutional change as they emphasis on historical differences and past dependence. So what is past dependence? It considers we can consider different actors from the same origin but with different paths and result in different endpoints. The second one is rational choice, new institutionalism. These scholars view institutions as the outcome of racial actor games. They generally focus on hard institutions, less analysis of soft institutions. They explain institutional change as they has a strong functionalist orientation, emphasizing the efficiency of the institution. Like I think some institutions changes because the old institution is not good enough, and the new institution is more efficient. The third one is sociological new institutionalism. These scholars emphasize the role of soft institutions, especially perceptions and cognitive styles. They view institutions as the result of diffusion, popularization, and institutionalization of ideas and cognitive styles. They explain they less explain the institutional change. They explain this as based on conceptual or cultural changes. In Granovetter's words, this kind of idea is called over socialization. So actually, I think it's hard for them to explain changes change because it's hard to explain how perception change. Just they received criticism just as Parsons' structural functionalism received. It contains difficulty in explaining change. My first reading is about Dobbin's forging industrial policy. So I matched it to sociological institutionalism, and this book tells us about the respective shapes of real world industries in the United States, France, and Britain, correspond to their political beliefs of each country, demonstrating the importance of beliefs as an institutional factor. So the influence of institutions is not only through the structure and arrangements that motivate or guide the rational actions of actors, like seeking to maximize profits. But these institutions shape actors' perceptions and cognitive frameworks. It means what actions are perceived to be justified, and what actions leads to good results. So in his work, political traditions shaped industrial institution in railway policy. For example, in U.S., the railway policy was more market driven, with limited governments involved and regulated. This kind of policy design reflect its political concepts as local communities and municipalities are the cornerstone of democracy, protect against central government intervention and dictatorship, and federal government and courts play the role of arbitration. In France, central government led the road planning. Private companies found and operate. This kind of practice reflected the concept of political concept that it is through the central government that the interference of local and small group interest in achieving the overall interest can be overcome. And in UK, it was more private sector centric. Railway building was completely lack of government involvement, investment, or route selection, etc. So, in terms of regulation, the emphasis is on protecting the rights and interests of individuals and the enterprise from infringement by other individuals or enterprises. So these kind of practice reflect the institutional concept that protection of individual freedom and the rights of interest. if we treat institution towards culture, it's easy to explain the similarities between like political traditions or industrial policies, but I think it's hard to explain institutional change in each country's trend. So I'm trying to find out some other explanations in the evolution of institutions. So the second book, How Institutions Evolve: The Political Economy of Skills in Germany, Britain, and the United States and Japan. It is by a political scientist, and I regard it as historical institutionalism. Actually, she also find that the main part of this book is about German vocational education institutions, and it was found out that German vocational education institution has undergone a great number of historical turning points. It is incredible that the philosophy of a collectivist management institution with joint labor management participated to regulate how companies train and their trained workers have remained unchanged. So this kind of unchanged can be better explanation by culture or by sociological institution. But it also argues that due to a great deal of political struggle and periodic renegotiation, the German vocational education institution have survived, but at the same time, those institutional arrangements have developed along a completely different and unpredictable trajectory than the logic of inception. It's inception. And so it's more stressed on historical interactions between different actors. So we can jump out from the impact of historical turning point, like but focus on stable period in which this small trends in the major institutional transformations, but this kind of but this smaller subtle institutional change led to some more observable final change in these institutions. That's all. That's what I'm reading and what I'm caring about. So I'm still thinking about how to combine these two kind of traditions together, or give out a more better understandings of how institutions change. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you for that. I was just wondering if you would talk a little bit about your experience of doing this research. Did you find anything surprising, or if you want to share about the difficult part of the process or enjoyable part of the process, something along those lines?
Actually, I do not regard my work as research. So maybe I want to achieve some research in the future, but I think it's more important to understand better what have been done in historical sociology. So it's just some readings and
That's fine. Yeah. Whatever you want to. I consider it research for our purposes. That's research. Yes. But do you want to talk about just your process of doing this project, the work itself? Anything that you want to share about the experience of doing this work? Something enjoyable or
I mean,
difficult? Or...
it's just like reading, taking notes, and a presentation.
Okay, that's fine. Maybe you could summarize in one or two sentences how you're conceptualizing, how would you articulate at this point answer to your original question about how the macro forces shape the micro behavior. Maybe if you want to kind of synthesize these perspectives, or just, I know you're not finished with the paper yet, but just what would you like to answer to that?
Yeah, that's actually what I'm trying to I'm always thinking about. Maybe I still have to collect just as what it in these books they have already found that people often treat the change of institution of culture in for some significant for some significant genetic impact. That's still what I was thinking about. But actually, obviously, I want to find out some new understanding. For example, we know that in the history of Germany and Japan, how their capitalism different, how their today's modern capitalism form is due to the war or some very strong outside force make it so. But I'm still trying to find to understand.
Yeah, that's fine. I just thought of another source that I would share with you, but I'll email you that later. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?